let's get this rocking and rolling. Keith Myers is with us today. He's one of our senior consultants with Shipware, and I've had the pleasure of working with him over the last 4 years on a handful of our active customers, prospects, and just being in the marketplace. He's a keynote speaker at a lot of supply chain organizations, heavily quoted in periodicals. And today, the focus is solely on the 2022 general rate increase. So we're going to look at FedEx and UPS, what was advertised, and what's actually going to happen. So we're hoping that you take away, some information here around how this may be impacting your business, your pricing structure, and then also some key points on how to mitigate those increases. So Keith Myers, he's been with Shipware for 4 years. Before that, spent about 7 years on the FedEx side of the house, writing these agreements in their revenue management department, where the sole focus is margin, right? They look at every agreement before it gets released to a customer of theirs. And his job is to basically determine if it's a valuable client to keep around for FedEx. So has a ton of experience writing these agreements, now works for the good guys with Shipware, and it's just a wealth of knowledge. So I'm excited to have him speak to us today, and I'll let you take it over. Thanks, Keith.
Great, thanks, Connor. All right, yeah, as we mentioned, we're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so talking about the 2022 rates for UPS and FedEx. And as far as generally what we'll go over, we'll talk about the list rates, but then as you probably know, that's not the only thing that went up. Surcharges went up as well. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about what's gone on with fuel surcharges. They're their own little special animal. And then we take a look at a couple of examples just to get a sense for what that rate increase really looks like, and then talk a little bit about some ideas on how to mitigate the rate increases that everyone took. And then there's an appendix that just shows a little comparison of list rates between UPS and FedEx, just to provide a little bit of context. Just as a quick reference, if you want to get an idea of if my 50% discount with UPS is the same as my 50% discount with FedEx. So first, let's talk about the rates. So 2022 announced average rate increase was 5.9% for UPS, highest average increase in about 10 years or so. But the one thing that is different about that 5.9, 6.9% average rate increase from 10 years ago is fuel. So I've got a clip from the press release from 2011 regarding the 2012 rates, 5.9% increase, but it was reduced. The fuel surcharge table was reduced by 1 point, or 6.9%, fuel reduced by 2 points to offset. So essentially it was a 4.9% increase, which is the increase that we had seen historically up until this year. So it was still 4.9 in 2012, even though the rates went up by more than 4.9. Fuel was changed to offset it. That did not happen this year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. And FedEx, same thing. Average rate increase 5.9%. As y'all probably know, FedEx and UPS generally follow each other. If one does something, chances are the other one is going to do the same or something very, very similar as quickly as they can. And again, highest average increase in years. And from the same time frame, the 2012 rates, FedEx did the same thing, 5.9%, reduced fuel by 2 points. So, and 5.9% for ground, reduced fuel by 1 point. So same idea. And again, you can see going back 10 years that FedEx and UPS followed very similar logic in how they handle those rate increases. But it's important we talk about the rate increase. So yes, it is 5.9%, but it's 5.9% in average. But it is certainly not a linear increase. And what we've got here, these next couple of charts, are going to look at those rates in a couple of different ways. So this one is breaking it out by service and by weights. So you can see 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20 pounds, et cetera. The red bar is 5.9%. And you can see that for the most part, the rates are pretty close to that 5.9, some a little bit below, some a little bit above. 3-day select being one area where UPS took a significant increase, not a service that's used super frequently, but it is, if you are a shipper that has fair amount of volume in 3-day select, you may want to check and see what your rates look like year over year. But then if we look at ground commercial and ground residential, those, of course, ground residential being the area that saw the most growth over the last couple of years, as the pandemic forced 5 years of projected residential volume growth to occur in like 3 months. And FedEx and UPS are still trying to recover from that. But we look here, that lightweight, 1 to 10 pounds residential shipment, those took increases, 7.5%, 8%, way above that 5.9. And if you think about where the volume is, what percentage of packages that go ground residential are 1 to 10 pounds, it's a significant percentage, much greater than the heavier packages that go ground residential that took closer to that 5.9%. Same thing on ground commercial, heavier increase on for the lighter weight packages. Heavier weight packages got close to that 31 pounds, or sorry, close to that 5.9%. Another way to look at it, same thing by service, but then also looking at it by zone to see if there's any dramatic changes across zones. For the most part, no. You can see a little bit of a spike. Next day air saver for zone 2, 3-day select we already touched on. Significant increases across the board there. But if you look at ground by zone, everything stayed pretty close to that 5.9% in aggregate. But as we saw on the previous slide, the weight is really where the variation in percentage increases occurs. Looking at the same thing for FedEx. So same idea, we got the 5.9% line here. And similar to UPS, FedEx took a significantly higher than average increase on their 3-day service, Express Saver, not as great as UPS. So if you, the UPS chart went up to 25% on the y-axis, but FedEx only goes up to 12 because the Express Saver, which took the highest increase, was right around 10%. So what we zoom in, look over here, ground commercial, home delivery, FedEx ground economy, those lightweight packages above that 5.9%. The home delivery increase does include the increase to the residential surcharge. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but that's why if you look at the chart, you can see that the home delivery increase is just a little bit higher than ground commercial because that 9% residential increase is included. And the same with the UPS chart as well. The list rates are identical, but since every home delivery shipment has that residential surcharge, we included that in there because it is part of the increase. So, and then ground economy, again, those lighter weight packages, kind of the whole purpose of that service, much higher than 5.9%. We look at it by zone again, same kind of thing, higher than average for everything Express Saver, a little bit higher than average for the lightweight ground economy shipments. But when we look at ground commercial, home delivery, 1 pound and up ground economy, pretty close to that 5.9% in aggregate, like we talked about, like we saw with UPS. It's the lighter weights. The lighter weights are the ones that got a greater than 5.9% increase. So when we take a combined view at this, just to kind of get these on the same scale. So again, increasing the service and weight to go up to 25% on the y-axis to match UPS, you can kind of eyeball it and really see what the difference is. And there's not much, it's pretty close. We look at overnight versus next day air, look at ground commercial, ground residential versus ground commercial, home delivery. Increases are pretty similar. So really the only dramatic variation is on the 3-day service. But like I said, that's not a big big volume contributor in any way. So
hey,
now,
Keith, I got a quick question before you go forward.
Yes.
Coming off of the quarterly earnings call from UPS maybe a week or so ago, is there anything specifically you took away around which service categories or weights they are favoring in their network, which ones that they're intentionally trying to shun away? I know in the past it's been oversized packages. Anything specific that you took away and kind of that you see them almost raising rates or pushing people to use certain service categories because of their earnings?
I think it's a good question regarding UPS and your comment around additional handling and oversized. There's no change there. UPS is less interested than FedEx in taking on that volume that requires oversized or additional handling. Neither carrier is super interested in it, but UPS is definitely less interested. And kind of general comments on the on the earnings call, it's still a big focus of better, not bigger, which has been the mantra for Carol Tomei since she came on board as CEO. Really looking at the small, medium-sized businesses, SMBs, how they can improve that experience. So, as far as the rates and how that correlates, that lightweight home delivery, that's still an area that both UPS and FedEx see that's where a lot of volume is going to, and that's why those increases were a little bit higher than average. Another note that Carol mentioned, they are more than halfway through renegotiating with all of their extremely large shippers, and the outcome of most of those negotiations has been a significant rate increase. I think not on this earnings call, but on the prior one, she even said that those negotiations have been going really, really well, or something along those lines. So it's the focus is on small and medium-sized businesses, which certainly works for all y'all that are on the call today. But the really, really big shippers are seeing from both UPS and FedEx a little more aggressive pricing action in terms of taking on rate increases or being having less trailers available and things like that.
Thanks, Keith.
Yep. All right. So a couple, some of you on the call may say, well, I've got a rate cap, so I only got a 4% increase. Some of you may be saying, what's a rate cap? So essentially a rate cap is, as the name implies, it's going to fix your net transportation costs, not surcharges, which is what we're going to talk about here in a second, at a certain percentage. Typically, that's something that's available for shippers, in the kind of starting around 5 million in net spend with the carriers. So as far as if you're thinking about a rate cap request, that's kind of the rule of thumb that we use at FedEx, and it was similar at UPS as well. So yeah, like I said, that rate cap applies only to those rates that we were just looking at. It doesn't have anything to do with surcharges. There are very, 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 very rare exceptions, but neither UPS nor FedEx generally want to or will offer rate caps on surcharges. And so those surcharges went up by, as you can see, if you look at some of these, much greater than 5.9%. We look at the delivery area surcharges, 10% increases there. Residential surcharge went up 9% for ground, 7% for air. The delivery area surcharges for SurePost went up by 39, 45%. Additional handling went up in double digits for the longer zones. So you can at least, packaging at least didn't, for zone 2 didn't go up at all. So that's good if you get to take advantage of that. But for the most part, you can see here, wildly different than 5.9%, significantly greater in just about every situation. And FedEx, same thing. We look here, delivery area surcharges, 9, 10%, as we saw. We look at ground economy delivery area surcharges, over 50%, going from 235 to 360, 295 to 475, significant increase. And then on top of that, FedEx introduced a new ground economy delivery surcharge of $1 that gets tacked on to every single shipment. Somewhat surprising. And adds a significant expense to those shippers that were using that service. So a lot of the benefit of it was that you avoided the residential charge, but now you're not. Now you're paying an extra $1 to use the service instead of no residential fee. That residential charge we talked about, referred to earlier, went up 9.2% for home delivery. So, and then additional handling. So last year, FedEx did not have zone-based surcharges for additional handling in UPS or additional handling in oversized. UPS introduced this concept in 2021. Like I said earlier, FedEx followed suit. 2022, they've got their zone-based surcharges ready to go. So you can see what those increases look like compared to what they were for 2021, where it was a flat surcharge across the board. So a couple of areas where it actually went down ever so slightly, but for the most part, significant increases. And FedEx did add an extra layer of zones that UPS didn't. UPS, as we saw on the prior chart, they just do zones 5 and up, but FedEx has 5, 6, and then 7 and 8. So an additional layer of fees there for additional handling and oversize. So, and just to kind of take a look at this side by side, because it is important to, or can be useful to see what those surcharges look like from a list rate perspective, who's more expensive, who's cheaper. For the most part, UPS is a tick higher in some areas. Residential being one where UPS's starting point is 10 cents higher on ground, 5 cents higher on express. Delivery area surcharges are about a wash until you get down to SurePost and SurePost versus ground economy. As we saw, FedEx took a over 50% increase on those two surcharges, so they are significantly more expensive at a starting point. So it's something to factor in if you're kind of looking at a 50% discount on one service versus a 50% discount or surcharge versus a 50% discount on another surcharge. Is just check the list rates, make sure that they are the same, or if they're not, that you're accounting for that.
And Keith, maybe not everyone knows this, but didn't they adjust some of the delivery area surcharge zip codes? I know UPS did, maybe FedEx as well. So some of those packages that weren't receiving them in the past may get them now and others not. So, something to do on your own, a new analysis on which will be impacted and the shift in zones. So it's kind of, they're moving the cheese, so to speak.
Yeah, that is a great point, Connor. Thank you for bringing that up. So every year, both UPS and FedEx will, as Connor mentioned, adjust the zip codes that fall into these buckets. What gets a delivery area surcharge, what gets an extended delivery area surcharge. As they make modifications to their networks, then zip codes come on, come off. There'll be zip codes that move from getting a delivery area surcharge to being extended. There'll be zip codes that move down. So it is, and they do publish that list as part of the rate increase, and there were zip codes that made that move. And then one thing that I did not touch on is that UPS introduced a new delivery area surcharge for 2022 for basically extremely rural deliveries in the 48 states. So there is a third level of surcharges here, and that the list rate on that charge is significant. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's in the double figures for sure. So it won't affect. Obviously, it's going to affect a very, very small percentage of the population, but something to keep in mind, particularly if you have, if your client base is, if you have a higher than average number of shipments that are going to rural locations, then that new surcharge might impact you a little bit more than others. But wait, we're not done talking about stuff that's gone up over the last year. So we talked about rates, we talked about surcharges, we've got fuel. So this is the current table for domestic express. In this instance, UPS and FedEx are the same. And we'll talk a little bit about how they got to there in a minute. But right now, UPS and FedEx have the same fuel surcharge for domestic express. That's not the case for ground. So FedEx is purple, UPS is kind of brownish. I think it may be technically gold or something in Excel. But anyway, here's the chart. So you can see as the price of fuel goes up, then FedEx loses their advantage. So, and as we're in this middle area here, it's pretty much a wash. If fuel goes down, then FedEx will have a slightly lower fuel surcharge than UPS. And if fuel goes up, FedEx will have a slightly higher fuel surcharge than UPS. And again, that's for ground. So your ground residential, home delivery, ground economy, SurePost, all that is applied here. And then just one other note on import and export, just to make that comparison. So UPS is higher across the board. with their fuel surcharge. So these two down here are for export. These two up here are for import. And so you can see, regardless of what fuel does, UPS is going to have the higher fuel surcharge. So again, just something to factor in as you are looking at comparing your rates between UPS and FedEx and trying to understand which one is cheaper. Fuel surcharge is part of it, and in some instances, there will be variation between the fuel surcharges for a particular service. One other thing to consider when you're looking at fuel surcharges, it's not just those net rates that we were talking about that went up by 5.9%. Pretty much every surcharge that we also talked about has fuel applied to it. So this is the list that I grabbed from UPS. Delivery surcharges, pickup charges, the delivery area surcharges we were talking about, residential, additional handling, large package, all the peak surcharges, pretty much anything related to the actual product movement, fuel is going to apply to. So that's for UPS. And one other thing to mention about UPS. So the fuel surcharge table can change at any point. And we'll see on the next slide how FedEx, what FedEx says about that. November 15th, UPS changed their fuel table, basically increased all their fuel surcharge percentages by 0.5 point. And then again on January 3rd, they changed it and added another point on ground and 3/4 point on express. We saw earlier how in 2012, rates went up by 5.9%. The fuel surcharge table went down by 1 point to offset it and make a 4.9%. But essentially UPS, and we'll talk about FedEx on the next slide, UPS increased the rates by 5.9% after they increased fuel by 0.5 point and increased fuel by another point. So you're looking at almost a 7.5% increase once you factor in the changes to fuel. FedEx. So again, this is copied from the FedEx website. I've highlighted the pertinent statement in yellow there. May be amended or augmented without notice. So basically FedEx can change it however they want, whenever they want. UPS has similar language somewhere in their service guide. But it is, and both carriers have done that. We just talked about what UPS did over the last couple of months. FedEx changed their fuel surcharge table on November 1st and essentially moved everything up by 1.75 points. And then you add on that 5.9% increase that we talked about. And again, you're pushing an 8% increase over the last couple of months between the 2022 rates and changes to the fuel surcharge. FedEx has the similar list of surcharges where fuel is applied. Theirs is laid out a little bit differently, but it's all the same things that we talked about. Essentially anything involving the movement of packages, additional handling, oversized, residential, delivery area, peak fees, or as any temporary surcharges currently in effect. So it all applies. So it's important to remember that when you're looking at your 2021 to 2022 rates, that there's a lot of moving parts to those rate increases. It's not as simple as that 5.9%. And to highlight that, just got a couple of examples to walk through. So this first one, a lightweight home delivery shipment, so 2 pounds that went out on January 27th. So we're comparing year over year. So we'll say January 27th, 21 and January 27th, 2022. For this example, the shipper did have a 4% rate cap. They had a $2 reduction off their home delivery minimum and a 50% reduction on the residential surcharge. But they're a high volume shipper, so they qualify for any peak surcharges that are currently in effect. So when we break that out, in 2021 with FedEx, they would have paid $9.52. At this point last year, FedEx did not have a peak residential surcharge in place. However, in 2022, the rates went up by 4%, so $6.76 up to $7.03. Residential surcharge went up by 20 cents. There's a peak residential charge, and then fuel on top of all of that. So you get to over $11 for that fee, almost an 18% increase year over year. UPS, same thing. So same math. The minimums are the net rates are the same, $6.76 and $7.03. The list rates for ground and between UPS and FedEx are identical up to 9 pounds. So just as a note, and that's something that's in the appendix. Residential charge, we talked about UPS a little bit higher, and UPS both last year and this year have a 30-cent demand charge in place, and then fuel. So about a 10% increase with UPS. And if you compare them, in 2021, UPS was higher, but in 2022, UPS is a touch cheaper in this example because of the addition of FedEx's 60-cent fee versus UPS's 30-cent fee. So even with the slightly higher residential surcharge, this 30-cent difference wins the day. Next example is a heavier home delivery shipment. So where the scenario of 50% residential reduction and a 50% additional handling reduction. We look at 2021 with FedEx. You can see the rates, the residential charge, additional handling. There was a peak additional handling charge that was in place. So there's $3 there, and then $2.27 on fuel, so about $39 for this shipment. In 2022, interestingly, FedEx did not extend their peak additional handling surcharge for 2022. It is not currently in place. As we see down here, UPS is at $3.50, but FedEx did not extend it. I think they just looked at the move to zone-based additional handling as enough of an increase, and so they chose not to extend at this point. We'll see if they change it. So you factor that in, about an 8% increase. So not too bad, I guess, all things considered. When we look at 2021 with UPS, so you've got their additional handling at $13.50, $3 for their peak surcharge, which went up to $3.50 for 2022. So when you add all that up, then you're looking at about a 17% increase for UPS for this example. So again, this is a heavier home delivery shipment. And then the last one I wanted to look at was ground economy. You can see the ground economy at the delivery area surcharge. So in 2021 with FedEx, they're paying about $7.65 for that shipment. There's a delivery area surcharge, there's the rate, and there's fuel. But now with 2022, the rates went up. So you can see up to $6.60. Delivery area surcharge went up a bunch. We've got that new dollar delivery fee, and then fuel on top of that. Fuel went from 6.5% to 12% when we look from January 2021 to January of 2022. So you can see, factor all that in, 37% increase in this example. UPS, it's only an 18.5% increase. They still have that, the peak surcharge that's in effect if you're a high volume shipper. Their delivery area surcharge went up, not quite as much, but UPS's list rates for SurePost are a little bit higher than their ground rates. So that is an important comparison to be aware of. With FedEx, their ground economy rates and their regular ground rates are identical up through 9 pounds. But for UPS, that is not the case. UPS's rates are, you can see here, like 56 cents higher in 2021, and then now they're 45 cents higher in 2022. So with just something to keep in mind if you're comparing SurePost and ground economy, in that case, those discounts aren't going to be apples to apples. Your 50% discount with UPS might not be better than a 45% discount with FedEx. So you got to do the math there. But without the addition of that dollar delivery fee, then you can see that the UPS is a little bit less expensive, and that rate went up by about 18.5%. All right, so we've gone over a lot. There's, you can see pretty clearly, hopefully, that the chances of anyone actually having a 5.9% increase are pretty remote. So let's talk about what we can do to try to minimize that increase. So really the first step in all of this is you got to do the work. So you got to know your agreement. know when your discounts are expiring, if you got surcharge reductions in place, if you got rate caps or whatever. Know what tier you're on. Where are you at? Are you at the top of your tier? You have no more opportunity to grow. In the middle, how's your agreement structured? Is there, do you have opportunities to grow or not? Is there language in there that you need to be aware of? Minimum commitments. If you fall below, then you get penalized, or numbers that you need to hit in order to get a rebate, or any other additional penalty clauses. Understand that, know the ins and outs. Then know your shipping profile. What services do you use? Is anything going to change in 2022? How is growth impacting it? You have new products coming on that could change your weight distribution or your zone distribution. New locations that could change your zone profile as well. Do you have just one location on the East Coast, and now you're going to open a second location on the West Coast, so your zone 7 and 8 volume is going to drop? Or are you going to have a big push to move customers away from using ground economy and SurePost, or into using ground economy and SurePost, or what? So have all that work ready, do your due diligence, and do some analysis. Like, really understand, go through a couple of those examples, like we talked about on those prior couple of slides. Like, figure out some of your most common shipments and do the math to see what that increase is. Because then once you get all your work done, then you got to show the work to your carrier rep. So there's an interesting dynamic there. You're presenting your case to your rep. So on the one hand, yes, they're working for UPS, they're working for FedEx, but what they have to do is essentially present your case to pricing. And as Connor mentioned, I spent 7 years in the pricing department at FedEx, and you would have, in my experience, you would have a much better opportunity for success if your rep was able to give me a coherent reason why you're looking for what you're looking for. And it's not just, well, they're upset that their rates went up and they want a reduction. Like, I would just look at those and just kind of roll my eyes. But if it was, they're upset that their rates went up 10% for this, and 5% for this, and 9% for this, they're looking for this, 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 and this, here's the detail, the requests were rational, they were well thought out, then I would be much more inclined to be, to be aggressive with what I would offer in terms of pricing to try to meet those requests. So it is worth it to put that work in to build that case, because they are advocating for you to their pricing department. And it's similar with UPS. So again, I'm drawing from my FedEx experience, but UPS works the same way. Our director in our group came over from 17 years at UPS, and we've talked through this, and it's same idea. Like, your sales rep presents your case to the pricing department. So the more well thought out that case is, the more likelihood you have to succeed in mitigating these rate increases that we've been talking about. So then the other options, of course, are diversification. And if you don't have a relationship with the non-incumbent carrier, start to build one. Figure out who the rep is. Have them come in and start to understand your business and figure out if there's some opportunity. If you do a lot of lightweight residential shipments, then looking at the Postal Service, looking at postal consolidators, there's a ton of options out there beyond just UPS and FedEx, even regional carriers as well. So one of the bigger announcements that occurred last year was laser ship buying on track. So creating this kind of super regional carrier that covers the East Coast and the West Coast. As they integrate that this year, we'll be watching very interestedly to see if they try to fill in the blanks in the middle of the country, or if they leave it as a bi-coastal operation. But pretty much wherever you ship from, there's probably a regional carrier that could help with some of those zone 2, zone 3 deliveries. Then another option is diversifying your delivery options. So if you look at using a UPS access point or a FedEx hold at location type concept, that can help you avoid the residential surcharges that we were talking about, or the delivery area surcharges, some of those some of those fees and potentially allow for a better experience for your customer when they get their packages. Now, in some cases that could be true, some cases maybe not, but could certainly help with porch pirates or things of that nature. But just another way to think about how you're delivering your packages is, can these alternative delivery locations make sense for your business? All right. Well, I've talked enough for the time being. Hopefully, y'all found some value in that, and we'll see what questions you got.
Thanks, Keith. Gonna hop back on video here. I didn't receive any questions yet in the Q&A section.
Okay.
We found from last time that people tend to be shy during an open panel questionnaire like this. But I have a question going back to mitigation strategies, specifically around the regional carrier options. A lot of our customers, they come to us using the technology in the warehouse tied to UPS WorldShip, the FedEx shipping platform. Having technology that makes you nimble in today's market is, I think, super important. Do you have any thoughts on having those types of technologies in place in order to implement multimodal options and all that you just mentioned?
Yeah, and as those carrier provided shipping systems are fine, but as Connor alluded to, you're tied down, and it's just an extra level of stickiness that makes it harder to break away from UPS or from FedEx. So I think part of that diversification strategy, if you are using a FedEx or UPS supplied shipping system, is to figure out if there's another option that could work better, a carrier neutral or carrier agnostic system. Now, there are some contracts with both UPS and FedEx have language in there where they've given you money to help buy that, and you have to pay it back and things like that. But it's still worth having that conversation and starting to understand what's out there in the marketplace and how it might work with your business, because it is, like I said, it makes things stickier when you're using a UPS or a FedEx supplied shipping station to print your labels and process all your packages.
Excellent. We got two questions here, Keith. One, okay. Jason and Colby. Colby, I'll get to you second. Jason's came in first. Jason asked, how do we validate that we have a favorable DIM divisor for DIM calculations? He says that they have big parcels that aren't heavy and most activity is dimensional. So this is something we see a lot with, specifically thinking about just weird, bulky items. I have a client that ships plants, and they're not that heavy, but they're in odd shapes, so they get slammed with a DIM divisor. So yeah, I think the question is around, how do they know if their DIM divisor is favorable, and they're getting hit with it often?
Yeah, I guess first, obviously, if you're asking the question, then you don't have the standard DIM, I hope, of 139. I'll draw a little bit from my FedEx experience and kind of what we've been seeing in the marketplace. So when I was at FedEx, and as Connor mentioned, so I left 4 years ago, but I don't think the rules have changed too much. Anything is, if we look at ground, home delivery express, so kind of set aside ground economy for the time being, anything with a DIM divisor greater than 250 would require like 5 extra people in FedEx to look at it and decide if they wanted to do it or not. So, and ground economy had a little bit more flexibility there, but that flexibility has definitely been trending down. So I guess in terms of what would be favorable, anything above 250 would be outstanding. 250 is about as high as we've been seeing FedEx and UPS go in the market over the last couple of years. It is definitely a focus on both carriers to drive those DIM divisors down. So, if it starts with a 2, then you're probably pretty favorable. If it starts with a 1, then I would think there's a little bit more room to maneuver there.
Yeah, and another thing I thought of, Keith, as you were talking through that, I know we've gone through this with some of our customers together. knowing exactly how many packages are impacted. So once again, going back to that business case, doing your homework, and knowing, exactly which packages are being applied and what the cost increase is because of that dim divisor. That'll help build the case. Thanks for the question, Jason. Colby asked Keith, they don't have a lot of experience with regional carriers, and that's a lot. A lot of people are saying that as well. We've really seen the market shift over the last 2 years since COVID because of the throttling, of that UPS and FedEx are putting on their network, not picking up for some of those big box retailers, but more and more people want to have that option. But he's saying, comparing pricing and services, are those regionals similar in what they can provide to UPS and FedEx?
Yeah, another good question, and thanks for asking that, Colby. So regional carriers, for the most part, their service is going to be similar to UPS and FedEx. Focus-wise, most of them are focused more on that last mile delivery to a house. So, and some will do business to business, but for the most part, it's the lighter weight packages getting delivered to a home. And the advantages that they'll have with the regional carriers, the service area is smaller and their transit times are going to be quicker. So typically the pricing will be a little bit better and the transit time will be the same or better for just about every shipment. If you're comparing a FedEx home delivery or UPS ground residential package to a regional carrier proposal. And they can be a little bit more flexible sometimes with dimensional weight and things like that. But in general, what we'll see is a nice improvement on transit times, which helps with some customer experience, and along with an improvement on price as well. So, but again, it varies by region. But most of the regional carriers are really focused on the residential delivery, the residential piece of the market, as opposed to B2B.
And coupled with the right technology, you can route packages with the best cost carrier and time in transit. So you can build out intelligent business rules within some of those systems so that it's pulling all that information for you and don't allow human error to do it. Because once again, thinking back to a customer of ours, they were sending out so many packages via FedEx because that's just what they used to do. We helped them integrate UPS into their system, and all these packages over the course of that time should have been going out UPS, but they didn't have the systems in place to just tell them, you would be saving X, Y, and Z on cost and time in transit. So sometimes, we get stuck in the legacy ways when you got to look forward to the future. We've got another question, Keith. Let's see. Do you think we should be worried about getting our divisor renewed, as it's based on your experience, the way things are trending? They're at 250. It's been in place for 5 years. It's not been an issue, but nervous based on the current environment. Okay.
Yep.
Tackle that one, Keith.
Yeah, I mean, it will certainly get reviewed and get reviewed closely. I think there is. It's not going to get rubber stamped. I'll say that. So I think you'll have a chance on it getting renewed. Another option, if whoever FedEx or UPS comes back and says that it's got to go down, then you'll need to be ready to counter that and say, okay, fine. If you're going to drop it down to whatever, then we need to have our discounts increased by this to offset it. If it's if their rationale is, well, we're trying to get these 250 dim divisors out of our system, then the counter has to be, well, that's fine, you can move our dim divisor down, but we're not going to take an increase because you guys are just trying to get rid of something that says 250. So if you're going to move us down to 225, then we need to have another 1.5 points on our discounts to offset the cost increase that we're going to occur. So you got to kind of do the math there, but it is, it will get reviewed. And you should be prepared for the carrier to come back and say that it needs to step down, but it's not guaranteed that they're going to step it down. I think you do have a chance that it'll stay in place. And some of it also depends on how the relationship is with your rep, with the carrier. Are they doing a good job? Is your rep your advocate? That part of it as well.
And we've talked a lot about DIM. I don't know who all is out there in the attendees. Keith, you just want to describe what that is really quickly? I don't know if we touched on that in the conversation.
Yeah, essentially it's both FedEx and UPS have it's the same concept. So based on the dimensions of the box, the carriers expect the box to weigh a certain amount. And if it doesn't, then if it weighs less than that amount, then the build weight gets rounded up to that amount that they think the box should weigh. And how that's determined is that DIM divisor that we've been talking about. So the standard DIM divisor is 139. So they take the volume of the box divided by 139. And if that is greater than the actual weight of the box, then that's what you get charged. That's essentially what it is. That DIM divisor started at 194 and then went down to 166 and then is now at 139. So we'll see if it changes any further. But, yep.
It's to prevent them from shipping air. They want those dense packages. Length times width times height divided by that DIM divisor. The higher your DIM divisor, the more favorable the actual calculation of the build weight. So whatever's higher, they're going to bill you at. Any other questions, guys? Nothing's come in the meantime. If so, we can wrap it up and everyone can get back to their days. Give it another second or so. Nope. All right, fantastic. Well, Keith, thank you so much for your time and putting in all the work for this. Everyone, thanks for joining. I think we're going to record. I think this was recorded, so we'll post a YouTube link if you want to go back and see anything specific. If you have any questions, once again, you can reach out to Keith or myself. We have the website chat box. There's a live human on the other end of that if you have anything specific, but plenty of resources on the Shipware team to get you the answers you need. But we hope you guys have a successful 2022 and everyone stay safe and healthy out there. It's looking up for everybody. So thanks again. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, everyone.